guys, I'm Jen, this is my channel Sir Tommy, and today I am doing a wrap up for the month of March. All the books I read in March. There's a few of them, so I'm probably going to split this video into two. Haven't decided yet, but we'll see how we go. Alright, so let's get into all the books I read in March. There's 12 of them, 10 are like full-length novels and 2 are like short stories. So yeah, we better start. So at the very end of February, I started Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat and super addicted to it, loved it, and because my birthday is at the very beginning of March, I went to a bookstore because how else are you meant to spend your birthday, and I bought the entire trilogy and I started reading the next 2 books in the series. So those are the first 2 books I finished. They are Prince's Gambit, Book 2, and King's Rising, Book 3, by C.S. Pacat. So, kind of hard to talk about the last 2 books in a series. So I'm probably going to do a book review for them, but what I want to say is, if you don't know what the series is about, it's basically about this prince named Damianos, but we know him as Damon. And basically on the day of his father's death, who is the king, his half-brother basically puts into action this plan he has to take over the throne. He does that, but then what is he supposed to do with his brother who's the rightful heir? Well, he, instead of killing him, which I suppose is a small blessing, he sends him to be a pleasure slave to their enemy state's Prince Laurent. So that goes about as well as you think it does. And the trilogy basically follows their relationship, but it starts off at this like really genuine hatred, right? So it's the, you know, enemies to lovers trope, but it's actually done extremely well, and they have genuine reason to hate each other, and it's just fantastic. So but I know this series is quite controversial, okay? And I understand that, and I basically think all of that controversy is because of the first book, Captive Prince, which is quite a short book. Now, a lot of people read this book, hate it, and stop. I read this book, enjoyed it, didn't see much wrong with it. I'm not saying it's faultless or perfect. I know that there are issues, but I really enjoyed it, so like I said, continued on straight away. And I think that is the best thing to do with this series, because this book is not a good standalone book, okay? It's building up to specifically Prince's Gambit, which I think is where all the best stuff happens in this series. This is when you go from this and leads into the ending. Obviously, that's what the second book in a series is meant to do. But like, that's where all the development happens, you know? And so this book, although great in my perspective, and I'll talk about that in a review about why I did like it, if you just read this, you're not gonna like it. Unless you know what's gonna go on, and you have to do that by reading it, you're not gonna like the series. So if you read Captive Prince and you're on the fence, continue on. If you read Captive Prince and you hated it, do what you want to do. That's fine. But I don't think you should bag an entire series based on its first book, especially when it's, in my opinion, deliberately going hardcore in throwing everything that can possibly be bad. So, yes. That being said, Prince's Gambit and King's Rising are excellent books. They really build on the first book, and they're almost like an entirely different series, but it just makes sense. The pacing's great. Everything is done so thoughtfully. It's a really good series. I love this series. I gave the entire series 5 stars, which means book 1, book 2, and book 3. I can't recommend it enough. It's a favorite of mine, and I inhale read it, so it took like 4 days of reading all 3 books. Because I loved it so much, I went on like a C.S. Pacat binge. So I listened to an interview she did, and she has 2 short stories out of a series of 4 short stories she's doing in relation to the Captive Prince universe, I guess. So 2 are out. I read Green But for a Season and The Summer Palace. So the 2 short stories. Green But for a Season follows two side characters in the series, and it's really short, and I couldn't rate it because it was just so tiny. It was so unrelated. You need so much context for it. There really wasn't anything for me to rate in it, and that being said, I did enjoy it. But did it add to the series? No, it was purely for like fans' pleasure. So there you go. Summer Palace, however, is a little bit longer, and it's kind of like a little bit like an epilogue, but not really. It follows on from where the story left off between Laurent and Damon, and it's really good. Like, you'd think it's like you know, just fulfilling fans' dreams of like wanting to see more, but no, actually it really considers some things that weren't resolved in the book and things that still needed to be built upon, you know, making the relationship more healthy, more issues to be dealt with, and it actually does that in the Summer Palace short story. That being said, it is extremely fluffy and sweet, and it will make your heart happy. So that also got 5 stars from me, and I can't wait for the next 2 short stories. I have no idea when they're coming out, but again, I can't wait. So with that out of my system, I admittedly was in a bit of a book hangover because I just loved it so much, so I tossed up between a couple of books. But the next book I finished was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. The rest of the books of this video, just by the way, I borrowed out from my library, so I've returned them all since then, sorry, but yeah, images, here, you get that. I'm not sure there's a more hyped book on BookTube that is a standalone book. Obviously Sarah J Maas, Brandon Sanderson, all that sort of stuff, but like standalone book, I think The Night Circus, if it's not the most hyped, it's possibly one of the most loved, because I honestly haven't seen a bad review of it. If you don't know what The Night Circus is about, that's probably a good thing. You should probably go in knowing as little as possible. It's an incredible book. I think those are the 2 things you should know going into it. It also has a beautiful cover. But no, the best thing about this book is, one, it's a standalone, so it's so complete and so wonderful, and you get all that you want, and you're happy with where the story leaves off. It talks about everything you want it to talk about, and really, if it was to go on any longer, it'd purely be for like the fan engagement with the circus. I mean, it's amazing. But the atmosphere and the world building are what make this book. It is incredible to be able to think of a world so complex that's based in like our own world, but so magical realism and so detailed too. And for the 5 senses, you know, we get constant sense of smell and sights and, you know, textures somehow, and it's very incredible, and it's so just wonderfully detailed, but written in such lovely prose that's not over the top. It's not like purple flowery prose. It's enough to give you the picture, enough to give you this beautiful image in your head. More than an image, really. It's just a surround sound of experience. You can imagine yourself there, but it doesn't go more than it has to, which is quite a talent if you ask me. And yeah, you get that atmosphere, you get the eeriness, but you get the wonder, you get the awe, you get just, I don't know what else I can say about this. The hype is worth it, is what I'm saying, and I obviously gave this book 5 stars, and I'm so glad it pulled me out of the hangover I had after Captive Prince trilogy. Okay, so after that I finished a book that I'd started and put down, and that was Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. And this is the first book in the Wayfarer series. I have no idea what the series is called, but it's the first book in it. And it's basically about time travel. It follows a character named Etta, and, you know, set in like 2015, 2016, our world, New York, and she's a violinist, and during recitals she figures out that she is actually a descendant of a family line of time travelers, and the story kind of follows from there. It jumps around to a lot of cool time periods and countries, which I really appreciate because I'm a traveler and I just love to hear about random places. So that was really cool, and I think that's what made the book for me. Like, I enjoyed that. In fact, I think I enjoyed quite a bit. Like, the writing was good, the constant world building, you know, the constant changing, but having a set, like, you have the worlds of the different places they travel to in the time periods, but there's also just the world of the time travelers themselves and the rules that they have to abide by, and building up this lore almost, and this history that Ed is only slowly coming into and learning about. I thought that was really well done. I really enjoyed that, and I actually really like Edda as a character. You know, she sometimes says the right things and sometimes doesn't, and she does have a bit of a temper, but I can appreciate that because I have a bit of a temper. And she's very stubborn and strong, but still flawed, still scared, and I just really like her as a female protagonist. So that's really good. And even some of the side characters, the potential is there for the next book, which came out earlier this year, Wayfarer. You know, I liked the potential it left me with. There's one thing though that really bugged me and ultimately brought down this book for me, and that is the romance. So there's a second main character called Nicholas, and his story is so interesting, okay? He's a wonderful character as well, and I loved that I got to see from his point of view, and I loved all the issues that, you know, Alexandra Bracken dealt with, you know, racism, gender, like misogyny, all this kind of thing. She like touched on it, wove it into the story well. I loved some of the commentary that was in there. But Edda and Nicholas, the romance, it's so insta-love. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler, but like, even from the start of the book, you can kind of, as soon as they're introduced to each other, you can just tell. You just know where it's going from, and that's so annoying. And more than that, it's the fact that it happened so quickly, and it's like, the thing that bugs me is it's a really good relationship. Like, I don't have a problem with those two characters being together, and I think their actual relationship is quite healthy, at least what I've seen from the first book. You know, I thought, you know, they were good for each other, and I liked the little bit of conflict that was in there, but it just happened way too fast. Like, what happened in that first book, I would have loved to seen it stretched out 2, maybe even 3 books. But instead it happens not even in a full book. It happens like just more than I would want, and it was so sudden, and it just, every time I read it I was like, no, there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm like, too soon, no, focus on other things, come on. Originally I was thinking of giving it 4, maybe even 4.5 stars, and in the end I think I gave it 3.5 stars. Passenger was good, but I just need something very different. So I ended up picking up Josies Homegoing, which is a book that's going around BookTube as well, but just sounded so interesting. I had to pick it up, and I loved it. If you don't know what Homegoing is about, it basically follows 2 family lines that are related. So there's 2 half-sisters at the very beginning. They're from like the Gold Coast, which I think is like Ghana and all that kind of areas now, of Africa. And it follows the 2 half-sisters and their descendants for 8 generations, and it crosses like 300 years. It's amazing. One sister marries a white colonialist and stays in Africa, and one is sent as a slave to America. It's all part of one story, so it's not like a bunch of short stories. It is one cohesive narrative. But you really, like, some people I can imagine would be worried about, you know, how complete is the story when you only get attached to one character, one chapter. You know, you want to see more, and, you know, I understand that, but this book is done so well that that character becomes a part of the next person, you know, and by the time you get to the end, you're still attached to all those characters, and you want the best for the character who you only just met, which I think is frankly incredible. So the writing is really well done. The research and history and everything that is shown and told and what's not shown and told is really interesting, and I loved the book so much. I don't know if any of this is cohesive to you, but all that's important is that I loved this book so much. So I feel like I've talked enough for the section, so I'm going to split this video into two. So stick around because tomorrow I'll post part 2 of my March wrap up. And yeah, comment below and I will see you in my part 2 wrap up. Bye!